We welcome back to the second segment of our show today. Looks like we're throwing out measles. We're going straight into the Islamic State of ISIS. Oh, the Islamic State of Syria and Greater... What is it? I always forget it. Greater Syria. Iraq and Greater Syria. We just got an update that Islamic State... The Wall Street Journal reported today that the Islamic State releases video purporting to show Jordan's pilot's death. Now, this is not the first time they've been executing people.
No, but they have escalated. No more beheadings now. They're burning them alive.
They're burning them alive.
Tar and feathers.
Whatever happened to the tar and feathers, exactly. I don't know. You know, when it comes to issues... When it comes to issues like this, it just gets so sensitive on either side of the story. And I for one, I don't necessarily vouch for it, but I definitely encourage arguments on something like this. But when we see stuff like such issues like this, it does involve us. It involves everyone in the world. And I feel like this is more, of course, it is a foreign relations issue, but we need to see more of how we're going to go about something like this, because we saw, 4 or 5 years ago, much of the territory that ISIS has taken over now was pretty much a safe haven when America was in there. I mean, when we had troops on ground, they were acting more as a security state back in the day, right up until we pulled them all out, and then soon ISIS came about it. And I every time I see of another execution, I always think back to George Bush's statement on how, if we pull out now, back to all of his statements back before President Obama, about how if we pull out too soon, that another form of a terrorist organization will come about, and it's come back more aggressive than ever. I don't know how much more of an extent they can go past burning people, beheading people, and it's really just an awful sight to see. But I do feel like the U.S. should have something to really appease about it, something to really initiate, like we always say, an objective, a procedure, something to how we can effectively bring something like this to an end. But I don't know. I mean, I'm really torn between the whole subject, because I always think back to that quote of George Bush, and I know he's on the opposite side of the wing as me, but realistically, I can't really look and take a liberal stance most of the time when it comes to issues like this. But Bill, what do you say?
Well, first thing I gotta say is W. But I think that what you said is right. That you really aren't able to go take a liberal stance on this, because I think...
Well, I say a liberal stance in the sense that it's like...
I know.
You have to really negotiate with the other side,
Well, I think that when looking at this issue, and it's not like you're... How should I explain an opponent? It's not like you're dealing with an opponent that is willing to compromise and willing to come to the table, and that you're fighting a just war, so to speak.
They won't meet you at the table.
No,
and I feel like that's from past times. Because if you look at, for instance, we see such attacks like the ones on the Pentagon.
Yes.
The World Trade Centers, and just
Oklahoma City.
Exactly, Oklahoma City. Anything under that idea, they see I feel like the Middle East and ISIS and Al Qaeda and all those organized terrorist organizations see those acts as something smaller to something that can become even greater to what they're looking towards. And I think they see the Crusades as something that has happened 2 years ago. Their time evaluation of attacks such as like that are so recent that they still have utter turmoil. They still have anguishing from certain times as like that, even though they've never lived in a time like that. And I think that you can't really look at the Muslim religion as a radical view, but more so just as a book reading, not necessarily book reading, but a source of influence of how things are interpreted in different forms. And I feel like the Islamic State of Iraq and Greater Syria are more or less trying to encompass more of an idea that is somewhat structured around the Ottoman Empire, but more so in their new modern approach to it. And I feel like that's what Iraq and the Middle East really needs, is some strong reformation of a central, not necessarily a central government, but a central form of, like we talked about before, an objective that they need to live by, earn by, and, you know, obviously live a peaceful life on.
Well, Pat, happy to see your conservative side on this issue. Happy to see that you actually are conservative in some way.
Well, I feel like the way I said it right there was pretty middle ground.
It was pretty well. But when looking at the issue, like George Bush said, if you leave prematurely, then all of a sudden this stuff is going to come about. All of a sudden you're going to have an environment, a very dynastic environment, where it's going to become similar to the Ottoman Empire. But
what do you mean by similar by the Ottoman Empire, as to how it ended, or how more so it
just
went about its things? Because obviously back in early 20th century, we can see that, I mean, they were, I don't know, I really don't know much about the Ottoman Empire other than some of the political objectives they had. Like, for instance, no tax representation on non-Muslims. So they allowed, it was just like America. I mean, not necessarily just like America, but more so in the fact that they were an accepting society to a certain extent. But really what brought them to an end is difference of ideals, you know? Difference of ideals, and that's really what tore them apart. But
okay.
I really want to see something in the Middle East that either doesn't represent what the Ottoman Empire had, but just more so an empire of which they believe is effective, doesn't bring any more mass killings. I mean, to me, I see that as a bad thing. I mean, I'm pretty sure I speak for everyone, but I mean, there are some radicalist views that believe that you need to wipe out an entire population of people to be able to instill another form of ideology. And I feel like something like that really is going to be the turning twist when it comes down to the Middle East, as well as oil and other crude commodities that are coming out of that area. And I feel like if some form of work was able to be presented to be able to put those people to work, or something that can keep their mind off of that turmoil that's going on within their country, something to be able to fuel something good, something positive, is really what they really need, something right now. And I don't think burning a Jordanian pilot is really giving it much honor.
Well, I don't think that you're going to win the whole battle there by killing everyone. Because the reason I say this is, and while there are definitely people out there that do believe that killing every single Muslim in the Middle East would work, the problem with that argument is that the sphere of Islam is not centered just in the Middle East. We saw that in France. The sphere of Islam has entered into Europe, Asia, and even here in America. And we have to be real about this issue. It's not like you have people of other religions, for the most part, committing acts of terror. While that may be happening, when was the last time you saw a headline where it was not someone tied to radical Islam? And we have.
Well, if you look at Al Jazeera papers, any paper, like form of newspapers, any form of forums that are within the Middle East, you'll see that the way that we see them in radical Islam and radical like militants invading other countries or anything like that, they see us in the same way. They see us as radical Christians, radical Americans, but they see us more of as an organized group of individuals. They call us the Americans for a very specific reason. And I feel like tying that to a certain scripture isn't irrelevant, but it has a faction of miscommunication on whether or not whether or not the Quran really represents what they're trying to achieve.
Okay, well, in my opinion, whether or not the Quran represents what they're trying to achieve or not, I think that there is a certain part of Muslims out there, and not all, But a certain part of them that do interpret the Quran as encouraging them to go kill others that do not believe in them, to go murder other people that do not agree with them, whether it be on issues such as fidelity or same-sex marriage or whatever. And here in America, while Catholics and Christians, while we all have our own moral codes, there is nowhere in the text where we are encouraged to go kill people that do not agree with us. Here in America, or in the Christian world, or whatever world you live in, what we do is we don't spread our force necessarily through jihad.
Harm or, yeah. Okay,
what we do is we spread it through a discussion of debates and enlightenment of ideas. Now, we live in a world where men are to be men and to sit down at the table, present your presentation, and allow for other people to be persuaded or not. And you leave it there, or you push forward, whatever way you want to go. But obviously these people with ISIS, they're people of evil character. And to really go defeat them, I don't know if you're really going to defeat them right away, or when you will. But in some way you have to limit them. I think the first step should definitely be limiting them. And
limiting or
eliminating? Limiting. Because already their sphere of influence it's gone to Paris, France, for example, with the Charlie Hebdo attacks. So before you attack the bigger issue, you have to attack the smaller issue of the organizations. And you have to have force and power there to do that. And then you have to build on that military force with an enhancement and alignment of the ideas and values, such as democracy, such as tolerating others' beliefs, and free speech, which they obviously do not value.
Well, let's go back to what you were saying earlier about how we don't encourage certain scriptures that that basically cause harm to others, right? You're talking about. I mean, I think one of the biggest things in the Quran is the infidel, or the basically the enemy of the state, and I feel like we all constitute something in that kind of paradigm, in the sense that, well, we all identify something as the infidel, like what's the enemy, the opposite of us, and I feel like that is the biggest misrepresented thing about the Quran, about Muslim, any Sunni Muslim religion that goes beyond that, and I feel like we really need to analyze the different sects of Islam as a whole, to be able to really understand how ISIS, Al Qaeda, any other real serious terrorist organization works, because they're pulling something from something to be able to encourage another something. Well, realistically, and I feel like if we just go ahead and like make the Americans the infidels, or for instance make anybody else among the Middle East or Iraq or Afghanistan, or I mean any country within the Middle East, we're really not figuring out who the infidel is. I mean, understandably, we are, as Americans, the infidel, because we are trying to suppress those individuals as a whole. I mean, we're trying to suppress like ISIS as a whole to be able to effectively take control of the Middle East, but I don't think we can really definitively pick who the infidel is when it comes to dealing with ISIS.
Okay, well, Pat, I believe, in my own opinion, that ISIS and such organizations like Al Qaeda and the Taliban, they're running on the stream and line of thought that, and you really have to understand the Quran or have somewhat of an understanding of it. But basically, it goes to the whole idea that the Prophet Muhammad, he married his master. And if you look at that, and if you look at what the whole thing Muslim means submission. And I believe that they're running on the line of thought, drawing from this, that they've already submitted, that they've already run the mass, that they've already married the master, that they've been subjugated to the master, and that they're serving as a slave. And when they look at the West, when they look at America, they see that America has come in through force. and they've taken their goods, their gas, and America has brought it to cities such as New York. Wherever you go to New York, an island built with no energy, an island that thrives on energy, but how much energy does Manhattan actually take from itself, from the soil of the island? None. But the most famous island in the world. Any show you want, any food you want, any car you want, anything, the brightest lights in the world. All comes from the oil there. They feel like they're being deprived of the goods that they earn, that they deserve in the gas mines and coal mines out in Saudi Arabia or such place.
Well, I mean that's why they always have such subjugated hate towards the West, because we're seeing how these people they're carrying out acts such as the Jordanian pilot.
Yes.
But I feel like we really need to see what middle ground we can either appease them to make sure that they stop taking out executions.
I don't think there's any middle ground we can take with Al Qaeda
they
or anyone.
obviously have the majority of the table by taking prisoners and executing them. At least we're detaining them, and
Pat,
whether or not we're terrorizing.
Pat, they don't have the support of the people at home. What they have is
they have the support of the people at home. They have the entire Iraq.
Pat, they're acting Machiavellian and they're acting like the prince. What they're doing is they're using force. They aren't using a force of mind, except for that whole convoluted idea.
They're forcing a way of life. They're forcing their way of life.
Through guns.
Exactly.
And Pat, that is not a real way of having support. If America comes in there and America says we're going to defeat you, with our military, but be even bigger.
Well, then let me ask you this:
be even bigger with our minds.
Well, what gives us the right? What doesn't give the right? Why don't the Russians come back in again? Why can't they do just as good as us?
One, America is not Russia. America stands up for what is right. America stands for domestic
so does any other country.
And international terrorism. No, because Russia.
Well, then how do you determine
Russia is Russia for a reason? Russia has never been called the last place of hope for the free world. America has. America stands up. If you watched American Sniper, there are 3 kinds of dogs in the world. You got sheep, people that are just complacent. You got wolves, people that eat the sheep. You got sheepdogs, people that do what's right.
Right, and I understand that. I saw the movie, but I feel like we're really not. From what's good and what's wrong isn't really the major issue here. Because anybody was convinced on what's good and what's wrong. Anybody, no matter where you are in the world, and for many people, just about as America back in the Cold War, believed, like as a Russian civilian, believed that the Russian way of life was a way to go. But I feel like once they came down into Iraq and tried to do just as we are doing now, they weren't as effective, and it was shown to be like that. Iraq and the Middle East has been such a suppressed country for so long, and we could even use examples from Iraq. What is it? Wow, I don't know how.
Pat, right now you're getting into a philosophical discussion about cultural
I'm not
relativism,
trying to, but it's more of a
cultural objectivism. Pat, there's a right thing and a wrong thing too. There's always an actual law.
But you can't always determine that. We can't be the ones to determine that.
That precedes and supersedes the law of the land. The law that comes from God is much more superior. And Pat, when looking at
your God's different from their God.
But there is only one God. And Pat, when looking at it, Pat, you gotta look at it like this. Even though they might think in their minds that killing people and burning them alive is right, we know it is not.
Well, and the Crusades did it.
What?
The Crusades did it. They murdered millions of their people just to prove that their God was better. There
are defenses of the crusade. There are,
and you know what? I mean, that's the whole determiner.
But there aren't defenses. There aren't defenses.
Well, then how do you determine what's good and what's wrong in the Middle East?
Okay, how we put about it like this: subjugating women to not be able to express themselves is not right. That if I'm a woman and I see that, I'm not able to go express my face or my beauty in. It's not a provocative manner. It's a freeing manner.
It's a freeing manner, exactly. They have
they should be able to go wear regular T-shirts. No one's saying that. Oh yeah.
Well, I understand what you mean with women suppressed, like being suppressed in that.
Being suppressed.
There are many.
The political oligarchy there. Yeah. The oil aristocracy that's going on over there. There's a culture there where if you're a middle class person or you don't have connections to the top, you cannot thrive. And also, if the people that do have political power, if they don't agree with your ideas, then you won't be able to run for office. If we had an America like that, what would happen? We would have a place where people just say the same ideas over and over again just to please people. And unfortunately, that's happening here in America. No one wants to state the real problems. And the real problem in the Middle East is that you do have evil people that need to be wiped out in some way. And then, once you wipe them out with the force, so wiping people out is not the beginning. It's not the only thing.
Right.
It's the beginning. And
Exactly.
then you move in and you spread your ideas of democracy and free democracy and culture.
Bill, what we're seeing here, and I totally understand where you're coming from, and as the person that I may be, I totally understand where you are, and you're standing on a platform of which many people believe, and I understand that. That is a good, and it's what we determine as good, and I understand that. But when you come over to the Middle East or anywhere in the world, you could argue this within like what 100 years ago we had radical. We could argue that we had radical views about slavery. We believe that people of other color did not deserve the same rights as us.
Yes,
because
but
they were lower people. We
yes,
thought
but
they were
Pat.
right. But you can easily say the same thing about the Middle East. When you're seeing those people being suppressed, you can see how when they are so aggressively for something and they believe that as the utter good and the good moral of what their country should stand on. And we as a people don't see eye to eye with them that because we see that as a different view.
Okay, well,
and I understand that, but you have to see how these people are determining good and bad, like we were arguing about before. We can't be the determiners of what's good and bad, but we can only enforce a way of life that we believe is better. And we gave that opportunity to us in the United States. So for us to go over there and just kill for what we believe is evil is what exactly is fueling their hate for us. Is exactly fueling their hate for us. So I believe there is a middle ground that we can be able to meet at a table with guns. I mean, whatever it may be. But we have to make sure that with our state stays good and their state becomes what it may be. But we can't subjectively, forcibly do exactly as, for instance, what they believe the Crusades did millions of years ago.
Okay, well, Pat, there are a few problems with that argument. One, slavery. We did decide on the side of the right.
After 500 years.
But still, we decided. And now we've moved on from that. And honestly, good prevailed. Good will prevail.
But that was the way of life for the longest time.
Pat, good will prevail. Just as it did in that instance again. So then
let them evolve. Let them understand that is bad.
But Pat,
and they only learn through that through life.
Pat, you're arguing from a relativist point of view. You're saying that if they're doing it there, that's fine. Let them decide how that's good and bad. Well, even if you do,
I mean, it's against my views.
Pat, even if you have that belief that hey, let them go do what they want there, it really doesn't concern us here. It actually does concern us here because now we live in a world that is dominated by foreign interests. Not only
that contradict us.
In foreign interests. We have foreign interests.
Right. But we contradict those people in what their way of life is. Is that what you're saying? I'm just trying to clarify it up.
Well, yes.
Okay, so it's
but Pat, we live in a world where now to go benefit us economically, we go to other places and we go take their goods. And that's all free will. And I think that we should be able to do that because it's a...
Under what grounds? How can we be able to go over there and just take oil without bargaining and jargoning? Like I said before.
It's dog give, dog take world. If you have the means, then you get the ends. Now, if they want to go to Alaska and go take something, if you have the technology, if they have the technology, they would do it too.
So it's the bigger dog in the fight?
It is.
It's always been the bigger dog in the fight?
Kind of has, where the bigger will.
Rightfully so, but can we see that as a good thing? What if just the common good just prevails? How can we fully accept the fact that the common good will prevail if it's just a bigger dog eat smaller dog world? Is my question.
Well, I think
what if the South won? What if the South won and now all of a sudden we still have slavery to this date?
Okay, well, Pat, this is a discussion we're going to definitely keep talking about next week. Next Tuesday at 2 p.m. But for now, Pat, there's another show coming on. A sports show, I believe, with Benzino and Armand and Sean, I think. Am I correct, guys?
Yeah, I think so.
No signal from out there.
But even though that was an exciting debate, might I say, I haven't had one of those for a while, and I can't wait to continue it next week.
And next week will be even better. Hopefully no snow, but
hopefully no snow. Hopefully we'll be more prepared, even more with arguments that I can unload through a barrage of things.
Yes.
And I hope you will as well. This is the Political Gridiron signing off. This is Pat.
And I'm Bill. Go Gales.